Welcome to Unity Spiritual Center, where every week we explore practical spirituality. So this year we are open to possibilities. So let's begin with an opening intention, which basically is just remembering the truth of my being and your being. So join with me in consciousness as I speak this affirmative prayer and opening intention in the first person, present tense, and positive. Remembering there is only one thing going on here, and that's spirit. So close your eyes if that's comfortable. And in this moment, I remember the truth of my being. I am one with all that is. And all that is truly that. Infinite possibility, infinite wisdom, infinite power and expression. And it is also being me right here, right now. So in this present moment, I remember that I am the architect of my life. And my thoughts, feelings, and deep-held beliefs are what create my reality. So today I open to possibility. I intentionally remove the glass ceiling that I have created for myself and open to Spirit's possibility, which is infinite. And I am comforted by knowing that I can always choose to go at the pace that is right for me. I can always choose to stop and rest at any point. I can always question everything so that it is as clear as it needs to be for me. I rest in knowing that I'm fully supported, that the grace of God is right where I am always, in all ways. So with a grateful heart, I let go and I let it be so. Please join with me in affirming, and so it is. So this week's inspiration comes from the book of the month, which is Braiding Sweetgrass. Robin's home sits on the ancestral territory of the Onondaga Nation, where children begin each school day in a very different way. They gather in an atrium filled with light and offer the Thanksgiving address, the words that come before all else. They begin with the people. We have gathered, and the cycles of life continue. Let us give greetings and thanks to one another. Now our minds are one. They thank Mother Earth, the waters, the plants, the berries, the medicines, the animals, the trees, the winds, the moon, the sun, the teachers, and the Creator. Each offering ends the same way. Now our minds are one. It is a long purpose. Gratitude takes time. Relationship takes time. Robin imagines what it would be like for a child to grow up with these words, rooted not in allegiance, but in belonging, not in authority, but in reciprocity. To know themselves as part of a great cycle of life, where every being has a voice and every thanks brings minds together as one. So this was adapted from Wal Kimmerer Robin, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom. It's a wonderful book. So before I go into the talk for today, let's recap this month. So we started with the White Stone ceremony, and you were guided to a word or a phrase that would be your guiding light this year. And then we went into talking about wild strawberries and how they give generously and how we might be able to give as generously. And then we looked at sweetgrass. And if it's harvested respectfully, it continues to thrive and grow, and how that relates to our lives, that What do we need to purge and nurture in our own lives? So today, I'd like to look at infinite possibilities. And the question that guides me now is, what might we create together with the infinite power we've been given? And that power is knowing that anything is possible. So what might you create if you knew that anything is possible? That your limits are merely limits that you have put on yourself? And how might we create if that was the truth, that anything is possible? So let's begin with some foundational thoughts. Because in unity, we often affirm there is one presence, one power in all the universe, God the good, omnipotent. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but have you really dug into what that means? This affirmation does not mean that everything formed is God, or that every situation automatically reflects divine perfection. Do you say everything is God? I do often. But what I really mean is that God is within everything and always available in every situation. But it doesn't mean that it stands in the way of my free will. So let's look at the distinction. Unity teaches something more precise and more empowering. God is in everything, but everything is not God. So now you're saying, well, wait a minute, I don't get it. So let's go deeper into God. What is it? Seeing God in everything, in all. And unity is a call for what? So God is the life expressing through all things. It's not the suffering, not the injustice, not the limitation. The bottom line is that calling everything God removes discernment and responsibility. There is a lot of trouble in the world today because people blame it on God or wonder why God didn't intervene. And the thing is that we are the hands and feet of God. And so how we choose to behave, how we choose to think, how we choose to interact with each other isn't God in itself, but God is what's allowing for that to happen. Does that make sense? So calling everything God takes away your ability to tell what's healthy and what's not. And it lets you off the hook for how you live. You know, you could say, well, God made me this way. Or it must have been God who said that. It couldn't have been me. Do you see the distinction? It's like you can just blame it on God rather than the free will that each of us has. So when you really get this distinction, spirituality stops being just a nice idea and starts becoming something real, something that you can work with. You can partner with it because it's already partnering with you. It's saying yes to absolutely everything that you are thinking, saying, and being, because that's how it responds. It always says yes. So God can become, through you, something that heals, that guides your choices, and actually changes how you live. Seeing God in everything actually deepens compassion and sacred action, because you want to help and be there in the best way that you can when you know that Spirit is right there at the center of even all of that chaos and those people who aren't remembering that they can create differently than what they're creating at the moment. So unity equals God is the absolute source. That's the key word, source. Life is the evolving expression of that source. So yes, God is there in the midst of that evolving expression, but it's not the limits of what God is. So here's an example. It's like baking a cake. Flour, sugar, eggs, and butter aren't the cake. They're the source materials that make the cake possible. The cake comes into being only when those ingredients are combined, shaped, and baked. And it might not even be called a cake, depending on how much of each ingredient you put in. It could be a disaster, or it could be really great. In the same way, God is the source. Life is what happens when that source, God, expresses through form, choice, and consciousness. Now you might be saying, you're having pretzel brain at the moment, and that's okay. You can come back and listen to this again. So we don't call the ingredients the cake, and we don't call conditions God. Conditions meaning circumstances, situations, even people are not God. They are God expressing, but they are choosing individually how they choose to express, how they choose to think, and how they choose to do. And that's the beauty of it. It's a bit like saying, well, the lamp, when it's lit, is God or is electricity, but it's actually electricity that's causing the lamp to have the light. So God is the creative power behind life, not the temporary forms that life takes. Because all of life is temporary. It's constantly evolving and changing and transmuting. And your spiritual work is really to bring the conditions in alignment with the divine nature that you know is already present within and around you. So how do you do that? And maybe it's as simple as what Abraham Hicks says in the channelings that she does. And that is that if it feels more expansive, then you're in alignment with your true nature. And if it feels negative and constrictive, then what you're doing is you're restricting the flow. So God is the infinite source expressing through all things. The things themselves are not God. How does that feel? God is the absolute, not the conditioned world. God is not the same as the forms that appear in the world. But God is there. It's everywhere. It's what animates everything. It's what holds everything together. God is unconditioned life, not the conditions of life. God is infinite intelligence, not the limitations of your thinking. God is perfect love, not fear or cruelty. So can you see the difference? If you call everything God, including injustice, violence, and suffering, you remove your moral and spiritual responsibility to transform them. So here's a life example. Imagine someone says, this illness must be God's will, because everything is God. This belief blocks any healing, prayer, treatment, or change. Because if you were to say, well, this illness is presenting itself, how can I allow God in to transform it, to heal it? Unity teaching is quite different. The presence of God is the healing power within the body, but the condition of the illness is not God. Does that give you a little bit of clarity? So when you affirm healing, you're not denying God's presence. You are aligning with God's true nature as wholeness. So in a way, it's like saying, it must be dark outside because you've put, blinders on or a mask on, when in fact, you could remove your hand or the mask and see the reality that it's bright and light. So here's a practical takeaway. Don't confuse divine source with human conditions. God is the power that transforms limitation, not the limitation itself. So if you're feeling limited by something and you're saying, well, I've prayed and I've prayed and I've asked for God's help and nothing seems to be happening, perhaps it's because you don't believe it's possible. So what if you played a game with yourself? What if you said, what if anything's possible? What if I could find a way to step out of the way and allow for other possibilities to come in my reality instead? That's how it changes. That's how you open the door to infinite possibilities, is by being open to the possibilities and by recognizing how you might have been standing in your own way by claiming something to be the truth. I know in illness, in a lot of cases, people will say, my cancer, my cold, my, and fill in the blanks, rather than to say, this is a situation that I've created through my thinking, through my allowing, through my expectation, and I can release it and expect something different. So let's look at seeing God as all. Seeing God in all is not the same as calling all God. Ernest Holmes tells us to see God in everything, not to call everything God. There's a subtle but crucial difference. And Ernest Holmes was the founder of religious science and wrote the book Science of Mind. So to see God in all means that you recognize divine life expressing through every person. And I think when you can be, what would I call it, loving presence in the midst of chaos or conflict or turbulence, that you're a bit like the stone that's thrown into the pond. You create the ripples of the loving presence within wherever you are. And being here on this earth ball, you are influencing this world by whether you're being a loving presence or whether you're being fearful or angry or restrictive or judgmental or any of those things. So I invite you to, yes, stand up for what you believe is right, absolutely. But at the same time, do it from the place of loving. Do it from the place of knowing that everyone deserves to be happy. Everyone deserves to be healthy, to be loved, to be cared for. Pardon me. It means you honor sacred potential even when behavior is wounded or distorted. And there's a lot going on in the world right now where know that there is sacred potential, no matter what the behavior looks like. You hold compassion without excusing the harm that it's causing. So think about a situation that comes to mind, maybe that you heard in the news this week. How could you be compassionate instead of excusing the harm? And as you sit quietly with that question, the answer will come. So Unity teaches that every person is a unique center of divine consciousness. You are a unique center of divine consciousness, even when you or they are not living from that truth. So a person can be behaving badly, and maybe sometimes it's me or you, but that doesn't mean that God isn't right there. It doesn't mean that I can't turn my focus to what would love do now instead of being afraid. So here's a life encounter example. You encounter someone who's rude, dismissive, or aggressive. If you say, well, that behavior is God too, you normalize harm and spiritualize the problem. But if you say, I see God's life in this person, even though their behavior isn't aligned with it, you hold both compassion and discernment. So maybe you can think of someone in the news lately, and you might say, well, if I'm really spiritual, I have to say that, God's life is in that person. And then you feel guilty perhaps because you're condoning that behavior. And the thing is that it's not about condoning the behavior. It's knowing that Spirit is always saying yes. And if that person's behavior is not very good, there isn't really anything that you can do about it other than to love them until they can feel the love and transform. So you don't collapse boundaries. I mean, you don't excuse harm. You don't demonize the person either. I mean, none of those things are helpful. How can you be love in any of the situations that might be bothering you now? And allow Spirit through you, because it is within you, to guide your words, your actions as you move forward. So seeing God in others invites a level of respect and empathy that doesn't happen if you don't remember that God is there too. It's not passivity or denial or spiritual bypassing. It's seeing beyond the behavior. So unity is a call to what? It's a call to sacred action, not passive oneness. We could say, oh, well, I'll just sit here and and I will just know that God will look after it all. And yet I am the hands and feet of God. And so are my thoughts. And my thoughts are the most powerful when they have feelings behind them. So if I send out to the world ripples of fear and anger and judgment, then that's in fact what's going to be in my experience. So today I choose to send out ripples of love, of compassion, of understanding, of wisdom instead. And I invite you to join me. Unity is not just mystical awareness. It's practical Christianity. It's practical spirituality. So to live from oneness means acting with compassion, seeking justice, choosing love over judgment, and honoring all life as sacred. So here's a life example. You witness a coworker being treated unfairly. A passive spirituality might say, well, everything is God, it'll all work out. Unity spirituality would say, I see God in everyone here, and that calls me to speak up, support, and act, whatever that might be. Unity consciousness does not avoid conflict. It engages it with love, clarity, and courage. So here's a practical takeaway. Oneness isn't a philosophy. It's a way of living that expresses fairness, dignity, and care in real situations. So my conclusion is, there is one presence and one power, God the good, omnipotent. God is greater than all. God is not limited to what exists. God is not the same as conditions, forms, or human behavior. And yet God is present in all. So live this truth by this idea, knowing God as the absolute source. And it loves you. And there is this thing called grace that is always attempting to bring the highest and best in spite of behaviors or beliefs. Seeing divine in every person. Can you see divine life in the people that are involved in some of the things that you are questioning? Refusing to spiritualize harm or injustice. Acting from compassion, discernment, and responsibility. And sometimes you have to stand up for your boundaries, whatever they may be. So when you hold this balance, spirituality becomes real. And you can ask yourself, what's mine to do here? And maybe it's actually not a doing, but a being. And sometimes it is a doing. So each moment becomes a sacred opportunity to express the one presence through love, through wisdom, and through courageous action. So we looked at God and that everything has God within it, but everything isn't God. And seeing God in all, that the presence of the Creator is everywhere. It is infinite possibility, but it is not stagnant. And it is not the free will of individuals who are doing things that are harmful or negatively political. God is love. And unity is a call to be the sacred service for what is being called to happen now. And that is to be love. Everywhere, all the time. So would you affirm this with me? I honor God as the one presence and one power. I see divine life in myself and others. I live from love, divine guidance, and sacred responsibility. And I allow the good to unfold through my actions. And so it is.